Okay, hello, welcome everybody to this week's Online Communist Forum. And this week we're having a two-part talk, same as last week. The first part, Jack Conrad will speak. We'll give the political report from the PCC and we'll speak about events in the world generally and as well as in the Middle East. And then Yasmina Mather will speak specifically in relation to events in Iran and the current war that's happening. Okay, so Jack, I hand it over to you to begin. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Anne. Right. Well, I think we're in the third week, and we've got all sorts of commentary. Um, Most of it, in my opinion, is unreliable. And I'm not claiming for a second that I know what's going to happen. I don't. Um, but I suspect that most journalists, especially when they're saying radically different things, are also clutching at straws. But they sort of present themselves as if they know what they're talking about. Either way, we had a report, and it's not just going to be NBC. A whole number of different reports along the lines of Trump. Iran is ready for a deal, but I'm not yet. Um, Now, again, how do we take that? I don't think at the moment I see any signs of Iran suing for peace. Um, I mean, what I have heard, and maybe this is the offer from Iran, we want to talk. And what we want to talk about is our right to have ballistic missiles, our right to have a nuclear program. And certainly, I've heard the demand put forward that the United States must withdraw from all its bases in the Middle East. And under those circumstances, if they were what was being put on the table, I can understand why Trump said he's not ready to do such a deal. Uh, we don't know. Um, but I think the point that's been made is that for Iran, um, if it survives, if the regime survives, that's a victory for Iran. On the other hand, we have heard again. I don't know, you know how true it is. I'm sure there's an element of truth, but we have got lots of stories going around, fed by Trump, that they have their people in Iran. And we're not just talking about people on the ground. We're not talking about royalists or anything like that. We're talking people in the regime, at the top of the regime. Um, Even to the extent I've heard that Trump says, whoops, we've actually killed some of our own potential replacements for the new supreme leader. And maybe the new supreme leader is one of their people. Either way, what we do know is, although he's issued a statement, it wasn't recorded, it was written. And what we have is a lot of stories circulating, which I would give credence to, that he's badly injured. Maybe his face is injured, he can't talk. Either way, you don't, begin your, how should I put it, period of office as the supreme leader by just issuing a written statement. I mean, we do live in the 21st century. I can understand if he's badly injured, not having a video recording, but a recording just of his voice, that really does indicate, I think, something very serious. Either way, what we have now in terms of dominating the news media, at least, is, I would have thought, you know the predictable result that this war has led to. How should I put it? Transport tankers ceasing movement, price of oil shooting up. Yeah, it would have been predictable that strategic reserves would be released in such a period. again, the lifting or the easing of sanctions by the United States on Russian oil. It doesn't surprise me. And nor, I suppose, does it surprise me that faced with this situation, after all, 25% of seaborne oil, not oil, seaborne oil comes through these Straits of Hormuz. And what's the figure for liquid natural gas? It's 20%. And a lot of that, or most of that, goes to South Asia and East Asia. So China, India, countries like that. And of course, they're making now, especially China, make the commodities that then make their way to the United States and Europe. Hence, it's certainly right that prices will go up and there will be severe economic strains if this war continues. We've had Trump saying that given that the world relies on the Straits of Hormuz and freedom of navigation, Britain, France, Japan, and China should send ships to help out. Well, I'm extremely skeptical whether China will. Interestingly, I think amongst the tankers, or at least the ships that have been hit, my understanding is that that includes at least one Chinese ship. That would have been a mistake. Chinese ships would be sending a signal off. Basically, I don't know what the signal would be, but in your language and my language, the signal would be, we are Chinese, don't attack us. But given that last week, and we're not talking about this weekend, last week, I mean, I heard a figure that Israel and the United States together had hit 50,000 targets in Iran. It doesn't surprise me, you know, in terms of radar, local commanders, you know, control from the center. It wouldn't surprise me if that's broken down. And what we have is local Revolutionary Guard or other such military commanders. Basically, you know, there's a ship, let's hit it. That will be my guess for what it's worth. I don't think it was deliberate to attack a Chinese ship. I think the opposite would have been true. Either way, I don't think we should expect Chinese ships there to help out the United States. Britain, on the other hand, what's it going to do? It's going to be a token presence. The same actually, of course, applies to Japan. What really matters is the US Navy. Whether they will be able to open the straits, I don't know. I mean, I just don't know. I mean, maybe Yasmin would have more of an idea. I just think it's one of these unknowns. One would guess that Iran will be holding back drones and ballistic missiles. Okay, Israel and the United States will be attempting to target where they think these things are, but one would assume that enough can be hidden, squirreled away, and used. So it remains highly dangerous. And in terms of insurance companies and all the rest of it, my understanding is that either the rates have gone sky high or they simply don't exist. And you know, in a situation of war, will they cover such movements? We've had the attack on Krag Island. This is the island off the coast of Iran, of where a huge amount of Iranian oil and gas is exported from. This isn't an attack on processing or storage facilities. This is an attack on military installations on the island. We've also had the news that the US is bringing in Marines. Alex Kalinikos, I don't know whether his article in this week's Socialist Worker has been provoked by that, but has the headline, "Will Trump turn chicken?" And he says, well, will the United States get away with its invasion of Iran? Well, I think that anyone has looked at the situation in Iran since 1979. Anyone sensible has been saying the United States wouldn't think about invading Iran. Trump isn't going to invade Iran, and he's not going to invade Iran with these US Marines. My understanding is that there's 800 of them on the way. I mean, to invade a country like Iran, I don't know what numbers you would need, but if I said 1 million, I think that would be on the conservative side. Maybe the aim is to take this Prague Island, but I would myself, as an armchair general, very much advise against that. Okay, you could take it. That's no problem. You know, with your 800 Marines, you land them, you take it. You know, are the Iranian forces there going to be able to resist? No. But then you become a sitting duck. And I mean, and what's the point of taking it anyway? So I don't know what these Marines are going to be used for, apart from, my guess is, not to take this island and certainly not to invade Iran. Coastal raids, that's a possibility. You know, attacking this port or that port. Yeah, that might happen. Anyway, let's look at the new supreme leader. I'm just going to comment on, you know, people are being interviewed by the BBC. I'm taking them as genuine. And that is, look, we really wanted the United States to attack because it promised to overthrow the regime. But after, you know, 2 weeks into the third week, you know, the fact that ordinary Iranians, thousands of ordinary Iranians will be dead or will be badly injured. Apparently, there's been a change of mind amongst many. Well, you don't change regimes from the air. You don't change regimes with even 50,000 targets being hit. I mean, the idea is an absurdity, and you don't change a regime, any regime, in my estimate, just by assassinating the top leader. I mean, if that was the case, why didn't the Allies try to take out Adolf Hitler? And does anyone imagine that Nazi Germany would have surrendered if they had taken out Adolf Hitler, or Britain would have surrendered if they'd taken out Winston Churchill? I know there was the film and all the rest of it to kidnap him, but no, even if they'd kidnapped Churchill, it wouldn't have made any difference. You simply replace the Führer with the new Führer, and you can keep on going down that particular route. So I must admit that, you know, the fact that it appears to be the case that some in the US administration, not just people in Iran, but some observers and people in the US administration, thought that by hitting them hard and hitting them fast, taking out the supreme leader, somehow the system will fall. If that's true, and again, I'll be very interested to hear Yasmin's comments on that. Well, that is what I would call a miscalculation, or just plain stupid. I cannot imagine, you know, Pentagon war planners imagining that, although I can imagine Trump and those in his immediate circle perhaps thinking, you know, such an idea. Okay. Another, excuse me, I'm being very rude, but another stupid story that I've come across in the media is Russia's the big winner here. You know, we of course, we're in the middle of the Ukraine war. The mainstream media here in Britain, mainstream politicians here in Britain and in Europe want Ukraine to fight. They want Ukraine to bleed Russia white to trigger some sort of regime change in Moscow. So we've had this constant stream of bigging up your enemy. I mean, anyone who remembers the Iraq War will remember that, you know, Saddam Hussein as Adolf Hitler #2. And after that, didn't we have Gaddafi sort of being the new Hitler? Before that, I just about remember, you know, from my childhood, Nasser being the Adolf Hitler of Egypt as well. The reality is that if you look at it from a Russian point of view strategically, not in terms of how many extra dollars Russia will earn because a release on sanctions on Russian oil and the increase in the price of oil. But if you look at it strategically, who was Russia's ally in the Middle East? Well, it was Syria. You can't say that now. And it was Iran. I'm not saying soul buddies or anything like that, but I am saying allies of convenience. And here's your ally that's being hammered. And what we're told, and I believe it, that Russia is supplying intelligence information about the movement of the US fleet, aircraft carriers, and whatever for Iran's purposes. But it isn't coming in terms of armed forces. It's not capable of coming in with armed forces. And I was reading again, having mentioned Socialist Worker, there's an article by Judy Cox and Camilla Royal, the limits, I think it's something like the limits of US power. And they're saying, well, and of course it's true, every hegemon has the limits on its power. No hegemon is unlimited in power. That would be ridiculous. But it's sort of painting a picture of the United States sort of incapacitated. And I just don't buy it myself. They look, for example, at Vietnam, and they basically say, look, Trump is facing his new Vietnam, and they quote, for example, Iraq and what a failure that was from America's point of view. Well, it all depends. If you believe the hype about Iraq, then it was a failure. If you believe the neocon propaganda, and I'm not saying that I discounted it, but Fukuyama and the end of history and how we're going to rebuild the Middle East, the whole of the Middle East in America's image. If that was real, then that was a failure. On the other hand, where's Saddam Hussein? Where's the Ba'ath Party? Where's the Ba'ath regime in Iraq or Syria, for that matter now? It's dust, it's finished, it's ended. And what the United States delivered with Iraq, and I don't know whether that was its aim or that was simply the limit of its power, but it didn't commit 1 million soldiers to Iraq. It committed a limited number of troops, certainly in terms of getting its person in power in Baghdad. That failed, that's certainly true. On the other hand, it delivered a message. Those that diss the United States get wrecked. We destroy you. That was the message to Gaddafi. That's what happened in Venezuela. That's what's happening in Cuba. Note that the diplomatic contacts between the Cuban government and the United States. It's not the Cuban government laying down demands to the United States that you do what we say. It's quite the opposite. It's the United States laying down demands. And what I find intriguing is the how should I put it, the significant silence in the article by comrades Cox and Royal. And the significant silence is called the Soviet Union. And that to me is a pretty big thing, because if you look at why Cuba could have survived, why other such regimes in Africa survive, like Angola, Mozambique. It was the power of the Soviet Union. Why Vietnam? Of course, it was the resistance of the Vietnamese people. There's no doubt about that. Yes, they got aid from China, but crucially, they got aid from the Soviet Union, and there was a world communist movement, and you had a massive peace movement that fed into the American army, that demoralized the American army and turned many in the American army against their own officers. So you had, I don't know how many instances, but it was a frequent occurrence, fragging, shooting officers in the back or throwing a grenade at them. The American army started to disintegrate. I don't see that happening myself over Iran. Anyway, no, in my view, Russia is at the moment, unless Iran wins, and that's not just survival, but wins, and I don't see that happening. I think Russia is a big loser here at the moment. And again, I'm not one of those that buys into Russia's doing splendidly after 4 years in Ukraine. I'm quite of the opposite persuasion. I think it's doing extremely badly in Ukraine. And the idea that Russia, therefore, is just about poised to invade Poland and before, heading to Berlin, I just think is risible. It hasn't managed to get to Kiev. If any regime was vulnerable, it's not Zelensky that he will go, but it's the regime in Moscow that's vulnerable, in my opinion, to a color revolution. Okay, very quickly. This isn't just a one front war. I think we can talk about a two front war with Israel. So we've seen Israel bomb Lebanon. We've seen huge numbers of people displaced. There are also reports, I don't know how reliable they are, of potentially Syrian troops being committed into South Lebanon against Hezbollah. We also have reports that France is trying to mediate some deal by which the Lebanese government recognizes the state of Israel. In my view, that amounts to regime change in Beirut. Moshe, for example, has long gone on about if there's a war, Israel will attempt to redraw the map of the of its region. I think, therefore, when it comes to Lebanon, we shouldn't discount the possibility of some Israeli extension, some sort of how should I put it, buffer zone being established, and nor should we discount the possibility of Lebanon itself being divided. It's in terms of the nature of the constitution, it's already a divided country. It's a bit like Northern Ireland. It's an institutionalization of sectarianism, and with Israel, it's clearly got an interest in defeating Hamas, but it should be emphasized, and this is something Yasmin has constantly gone on about, that at least in recent years, maybe over the last decade, it's no longer simply a proxy of Iran. It's an independent force in its own right. It has been part of the government. It's part of the structure of Lebanon. It's not simply paid for and operating under the command of Tehran. Yes, there's an alliance there, but it's not simply a puppet or something like that. But also, there's another front to the war, and something that's definitely fallen off the front pages. And of course, what I'm talking about is Palestine. Gaza. When did I last read about Gaza in the mainstream press? Well, other than demonstrations, I haven't heard anything. The West Bank, on the other hand, we do know, again, reports are coming out, extreme intensification of attacks by settlers, basically backed by the Israeli police and army. Well, under these circumstances, it really wouldn't surprise me if this war lasts to see something happening in Gaza along the lines of forcibly opening the border with Egypt and pushing people out, or forcibly opening the border between the West Bank and Jordan, and again, pushing people out under cover of what is going on between Israel and the United States and Iran. Just raise the question as a question. Was it a good idea for Iran to hit back against neighbors? My understanding is that most of the targets it's chosen either Israel or US bases. So, for example, the ballistic missile that was heading towards Turkey, my understanding was that this was an attack on a US base in Turkey. Nonetheless, clearly, it does raise the possibility of these states themselves going from a we don't want a war to being dragged into this war. On the other hand, I would raise, just as a question, what is being called the Arab Street, and not just about Shia co-religionists of Iran, but Sunnis. What do ordinary people in Saudi Arabia, in Alexandria, in Cairo, in Amman, what do they think about this war? What do they think about their rulers under these circumstances? I can hazard a guess, but I simply don't know. So in a game, we shouldn't discount the possibility of the unexpected happening. So I raised the question of ethnic cleansing. I raised the possibility, the specter of the division of Lebanon. And again, I raise the question of rebellion from below, or maybe in a country like Saudi Arabia, from what I've read, maybe rebellion from within the state itself by sections of the royal family or the officer class or something like that. I mean, if that happened, I will say I told you so, but it's not because I know. I just think under conditions of war, all sorts of things like that can suddenly happen and surprise. I would be surprised, but not that surprised. Okay, so we're now half an hour-ish. Just very quickly again, we advertised on the can, revolutionary defeatism. Now, it's been raised with me, I think a bit tongue-in-cheek, that this approach that we have reminds some comrades of what we used to criticize, coming from Trotskyist comrades. I don't think that we do actually repeat what the Trotskyist comrades say. The Trotskyist comrades, if I get them right, and I'm not talking about all of them, I'm picking out the ones that we've polemicized with, say, for example, when they say defend Iran, they mean the regime. They do mean the regime. And so we all know the quotes from Trotsky, about Haile Selassie. Trotsky meant defend the Haile Selassie regime. If I can remember his name correctly, I can't remember his first name, wasn't it President Varga of Brazil? They meant defend President Varga of Brazil against some hypothetical UK action. What we're talking about in Iran is revolutionary defense of Iran, and that includes regime change, but regime change from below, because we're saying that the regime that exists at the moment is not capable of preserving the unity of Iran. It's not capable of defending Iran. And our argument is anyway, to actually defeat war, to actually defeat the United States, you can't do it simply in Iran. At the very least, it has to be regional. And therefore, you have to look for a proletarian solution. But we will raise, questions about bomb shelters, the question of housing. I mean, 50,000 strikes, a lot of them will be in Tehran. People have left Tehran, but not in any huge numbers. So what about the homeless? What about rations? There is some sort of rationing system. But what about the rip-off in terms of prices? What about the question of freedom for political prisoners? And I'm not talking about Israeli agents. What about the freedom of them? And what about arming? Not those loyal to the regime, but those that want to fight against Israel and the United States. And you ain't going to get a successful overthrow of the regime unless you take the question of arms seriously. I was just looking at an article in The Guardian. I don't know if you know it, Yasmin, by some woman that was saying women will overthrow the regime in Iran. Well, maybe, but only if you give them guns. Only if you split the army, only if you split the Revolutionary Guard. I mean, Yasmin, you might have been there, for God's sake, but I can remember the pictures of 79 of where comrades, such as your lot, were inside the barracks, army barracks in Tehran, handing out guns to the masses. That's the way you overthrow regimes, not by demonstrations, general strikes. Yeah, you want demonstrations, you want general strikes, but you have to have an overthrow, and that's done with arms. So no, we're not mimicking the Trotskyist comrades. We're saying that there needs to be elections to a constituent assembly. We do not trust the theocrats. We do not trust the Revolutionary Guard to call those elections. It must be a revolutionary government that calls those elections, if they're to be free, if they're to be genuine. Okay, next few minutes, just a quick note on drones. Clearly, we've entered into a new epoch militarily. We saw that in Ukraine, and we're seeing it in Iran. Just to note, I haven't written about it, but I sort of touched upon it in my last article on Ukraine when I was writing about trench warfare, which sort of came back from like a ghost in Ukraine, almost Western Front sort of type trench warfare, but how that sort of disappeared. There's still trenches there, but not manned in the same way. And what we now have is a kill zone. And so to supply the trenches with drones, to supply them with fuel, with ammunition, with food, to rotate troops, you have to go through this kill zone of where not saying the sky is thick with drones, but you leave that trench to get to that car that might be 2 miles, 3 miles, 4 miles, 5 miles walk, because you can't bring a car up because it will just get destroyed. That's what you have to, but that kill zone has been expanded. So we have a radical change in warfare. It's not just about, attacks on Ukraine's infrastructure. And the same is happening with Iran. Now, maybe America degrades Iran sufficiently that its production of drones ceases. That's possible. On the other hand, I've said that there are bound to be supplies hidden away. And I simply raise the possibility, again, I don't know, but if it happened, it'd be one of those moments in military history, but also global politics, if one of those American aircraft carriers was hit either by a ballistic missile or by a swarm, and it would have to be a swarm and enough get through to disable or to sink that aircraft carrier. It just strikes me. I mean, the figure in Yasmin's article this week, from my memory, Yasmin, was an Iranian drone cost something like $20,000, $30,000. I mean, just look at, I mean, I don't know about the Gerald Ford, but you just look at Britain's two aircraft carriers, and we're talking about a price tag of billions, several billions, 6 billion, I think, comes to mind. So, you know, that what a drone can do has changed the nature of warfare. And we might be surprised by what happens if this war lasts. Okay, just a very quick note on British politics. We seem to have some, how should I put it, given movement on attitudes towards the war. One particular stupid idea that's been reported to the PCC from one of our comrades, you know, one of the groups on the left, is apparently that Sir Keir coming out to support the United States. This was all because of the Daily Mail, the Express, the Telegraph. This is just risible. No, it's because the United States has radically subordinated Britain to it. I don't know whether you'd describe Britain as a poodle. Poodles in general have that sort of fluffy reputation. Maybe that's being too kind on poodles. No, but I would more myself, without over egging Britain's military prowess, I would more describe the relationship between the United States and Britain, that the United States has a Rottweiler in Britain. I mean, that's the way. And the fact of the matter is that the Rottweiler relies on the United States for food. The Rottweiler is on the lead. The Rottweiler is going to carry out the instructions of the hegemon, and that's it. And that's been the case in reality since 1956, in spite of Harold Wilson and Vietnam. Okay, last, I'm going to wrap up now. And just thought I'd mention the accusations against Zara Sultana. I was looking at my phone, and you know how you scroll through various news, and oh, there you are. Zara Sultana's been attacked because she's an anti-Semite. And I first went, I don't need to read it. I just went, oh, that must be the Daily Telegraph. Oh, it's the Daily Telegraph. And then I went, and it must be a load of shit. Read the article, and it's a load of shit. And this is the Labour campaign against anti-Semitism reporting the comrade to the Parliamentary Commission for Standards. So what's our comrade Zara been saying? Zionism is a threat to humanity. Now, it's not my language. I wouldn't put it like that. But you certainly recognize at the moment the relationship between the United States and Zionism, and how the United States has two Rottweilers. Well, there are many Rottweilers, but another one of them clearly is Israel. And yeah, certainly if you're looking at the Middle East, is Israel a threat? Yes. Who's got nuclear weapons in the Middle East? It's not Iran. It's Israel. As far as we know, it's got 140 nuclear weapons and the ability to deliver them, right? Not just stored, you know, in some bunker. It's got cruise missiles, it's got conventional aircraft, it's got submarines, all of which can deliver a nuclear warhead. Okay, the other one that Zara was guilty of is she says, well, they love killing kids. This is after the killing of, was it 165 schoolgirls to the south of Tehran? And okay, heightened language. I mean, again, I wouldn't use that formulation. But look at the front page of this week's Weekly Worker. You know, we're carrying a picture that's designed to move your heart. It's designed to make you go, God, this is wrong. And you would, again, you would hope that Americans looking at the 165 children that were hit in this Tomahawk strike and would just go, this is wrong. This war is wrong. It's morally objectionable. And on that basis, I perfectly understand why she says they love killing kids. I don't think they were deliberately targeted, but they were, how should I put it, acceptable collateral damage. That's how the Americans, if they admit it, and they do, I think, admit that strike now. But what about the other one? Apparently, according to this Labour Against Anti-Semitism, this idea that Zionism is a threat to humanity, this is just Nazism. This is Nazi propaganda. I was saying to the PCC, I've got my copy of Mein Kampf over there, and from memory, I said, no, Hitler didn't say Zionism was a threat to humanity. He said the Jews were. And amongst the Jews, he would have included the Bolsheviks and communists and people like you and me. We are part of a giant global conspiracy to bring down Western civilization. And so you could have Winston Churchill talking about our good Jews, but also our evil Jews like Leon Trotsky and Karl Marx and other such people. And actually, in terms of Zionism, Mein Kampf mentions it twice. And I'm not saying Hitler was a friend of Zionism, but it's true. And we've had articles by Moshe, Tony Greenstein's dealt with it. In the early years of the Nazi regime, the SS, the SA were told to hands off the Zionist organizations. They were allowed to continue publishing their paper. They were viewed as allies of the Nazis in the same way that the Zionists recommended themselves to the Tsarist authorities in Russia. We both want Yids out. Yids out of Russia, Yids out of Germany. And so Hitler didn't look upon Zionism kindly, but other leading members of the Nazi regime did look upon them kindly. So that is a lie. This is by the Daily Telegraph. Camilla Turner, the Sunday chief political correspondent, who talks, like most mainstream journalists on this subject, talks rubbish. The other one she had, the stuff about loving killing kids. This is the same as the blood libel. This is, the story put out by the Christians that Jews sacrifice Christian children for the Passover. No, Camilla, no Labour against anti-Semitism. In reality, this is part of the big lie, sorry to use a Nazi phrase. And I think it's important to point out, and I'm going to finish on this one, and of course, in his own bumbling and I think criminal way, Jeremy Corbyn's response, and that's something that's been attacked by Zara Sultana, his response to this big lie, to accommodate it, to appease it, to actually feed it with human victims, was a terrible mistake. And there are stories, I haven't read them myself, of Mondani in New York taking the same approach. I think it would be a fatal mistake to give an inch to these people. We do not need to apologize in the middle of a barbaric war. When people oppose this war and they use phrases like Israel and the United States love killing children, or Zionism is a threat to humanity. This isn't anti-Semitism. Okay, it's not my politics. I'd put more of a nuance on it. But no, this is their side lying. That's it.
Thank you very much, Jack. Before Yasmina speaks, I would like to ask those of you who are having a discussion in the chat to bear in mind that this is the meeting we're at, and if you want to get involved in this meeting, then the way to do is in the discussion after the meeting. So because it can be extremely disruptive and it can seem as though you're not really here, you're at your own meeting in the chat. And that's a great shame for you because there's so much of interest being discussed here. And now I would like to pass over to Yasmina to give her presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne. Thanks very much. I suppose they always say truth is the first victim of war, and the last few days and the last couple of weeks haven't been an exception. I get bombarded by emails, comments from people who are saying, "Oh, Iran is gone. The regime is about to collapse. It's all finished." And then others who email me headlines, for example, from reputable journals, Foreign Policy Journal, The Guardian. This weekend in particular has Trump, Israel and US taken up more than they can deliver, chewing more than what they can bite. Guardian making similar comments. And I take all of it with relative pinch of salt because basically we don't know. Both sides are very secretive about what is going on. And Israel, for example, is not allowing any reporting. Forget about the Gulf states. Israel is not allowing anyone reporting the damages to the buildings, to individuals, to anything. The BBC Persian service, and I'm sure BBC English has a reporter in Israel, every now and then while he's giving his report, sirens go, so he has to go into hiding. However, when he comes back, he has to admit that he doesn't know what was hit, where was hit, whether it actually the interceptors got the drone or the missile or didn't. So we have very little reporting from Israel. Al Jazeera has a few images showing damages to buildings, damages to what Iran claims to be one of the headquarters of Mossad. I'm not sure. I have no idea. However, this idea is that the Iron Dome has protected Israel completely, that nothing has been hit, is a lie, clearly. In the same way that Iran's way of showing sanitized versions of where the bombs have landed is not quite true. But we do know, for example, Iran shows more of what has been hit. Maybe it's to raise nationalism, patriotism, or whatever. So we know that the Institute for Aeronautic Studies, for example, which is a kind of, it's a university building, but it's got military training as well, military aerospace, that was hit. It's pretty much destroyed. There's a lot of streets in Tehran, as I said last week, neighborhoods that have been hit. And some of these neighborhoods, the way it's been hit does look a bit like Gaza. Now, I'm not saying Tehran is like Gaza, but if you put all the images of this huge city with 14 million people together, you will find a lot has been destroyed. And the destruction isn't Revolutionary Guards headquarters. I think some of it is deliberate kind of making people feel more vulnerable. Some of it is a food depot was hit. And that obviously has reasons because then you reduce what is getting to people and so on. Both sides, given the circumstances that I mentioned, are claiming the other side wants a ceasefire deal. We don't. Trump said it about Iran. Iran has been saying it quite strongly over the last few days. They might be bluffing. I don't know. I have no idea. But they keep repeating this. All I can tell you is that something that Vali Nasr, he's an Iranian academic in US, has said about Iran's position when it comes to this war sounds true to me. What he's saying is that after the 12-day war, Israel wanted a ceasefire. Iran accepted it. Iran was getting defeated, there is no doubt. But the fact that Israel asked for the ceasefire shows they were being hit badly as well, or they weren't happy with the way the war was going on. And Iran now regrets accepting that ceasefire, in that, first of all, they gathered information, came back to hit the places from which they had gathered information. It created months of uncertainty while everyone knew that that was phase one of a war. And therefore, the Iranian regime, according to Nasr, is determined for this to be the last war. The last war in that either they survive and this threat is finished, or they disappear, they collapse. And they're even happy with that, but they don't want the repeat of the situation between June and end of February this year. And I think that's probably true. When it comes to, if you like, breaking morale, hitting the oil reserves in Tehran last Saturday was actually one of the, if you talk to people in Iran, that has a lasting effect. People woke up to dark skies, right? Because the fumes had gone and the sky was completely dark. One relative told me she thought it was there was a kind of sun. The sun had gone eclipse of the sun. Luckily for Iran, it snowed the same day, it rained the same day, and the skies cleared. This has led to all sorts of slogans, comments by the religious side saying, God is on our side. Look, it snowed when we needed it, which doesn't work very well given the rest of the situation. The Hark Island bombing, as Jack said, it had some effect, but again, it's not on the oil reserves, it was on the military part. However, if they ever want to protect the oil reserves or the oil distribution, because oil goes there, tankers come and take the oil, they have lost their defensive powers there. A lot of people are saying there's no one there. No, there were thousands of people on the island. And most importantly, Hark is next to another island, Kish, which is the holiday island for mainly rich Iranians. You have to be rich to afford there. And of course, people who had escaped Tehran to go to Kish are now feeling very vulnerable given that Hark was attacked, and they see this as yet another threat. From what I have heard, and from what now eventually, after weeks of denying it, I think the BBC admits, quite a lot of the publicity about Reza Pahlavi wasn't real, both from inside Iran and from outside Iran. I have it on a very reliable source from the BBC that they were taken, BBC Persian, that they were taken in by aspects of the bots that were publicizing him. But that doesn't mean people have suddenly started supporting the regime. What they are supporting and what has changed is Trump's comments, for example, about the borders, right? So he's now it's not about regime change. He says maybe the borders of the country might change. In his last comment, he's made an extremely racist comment that all Iranians are genetically violent, or yeah, they're genetically barbaric, something like that. This is the kind of comments that actually rallies people around the regime, not necessarily in support of the regime, but around the regime. So we do see larger demonstrations when the government calls for it, not just by its supporters, but by people who will go there without the flag of the Islamic Republic, maybe will not shout death to America, but are trying to show that they are opposed to the war. There is also other ways people are showing their support for this war. Someone in Tehran was telling me that they go to give blood because the government has set up these centers to give blood for those injured. And the queues are so long to give blood, he decided there's no point, went back to his house. So there is that level of, if you like, wartime atmosphere in the at least in the capital, from what I can hear. The state has managed to control prices. It is surprising, but they have. My guess is through threats of arrest, threats of imprisonment. Most of the oligarchs, most of the rich people who were profiteering from sanctions are their own relatives. So presumably they have managed a level of control. The question is, how long can they last? How long can they control this? As this goes on, there will be those who would want to make more profit, quicker profit, maybe with the idea that they won't survive this war. So they want to presumably take the money and run or whatever. The Islamic Republic has something called digital credit for essentials, which means essential foods, essential medical services. And this is specific to low-income families. But I have no way, and I've asked others, I have no way of finding out how they determine these low-income families. Is there a political factor in determining low-income families? Is there a discrimination between those who might have martyrs for the regime or martyrs against the regime, i.e. people killed by the regime for their opposition? So there is quite a lot there that I'm trying to find out, but I don't know enough to say at this stage. In terms of the escalation of threats and so on, as I had said, I didn't think Mojtaba Khamenei was the, if you like, obvious choice for replacing his father. And now that the whole situation is finished, we know that Khamenei had left specific instructions that he didn't want his son to replace him. So all this talk of monarchical, hereditary supreme leader is nonsense. There are very good reasons from what I hear from others in Iran why they chose him. It was to show a level of continuity. It was to reduce tensions between the factions. They had considered other members of senior clerics, but they decided anything might be interpreted as change and therefore weakness, and they were determined not to show that. He's clearly not well, despite Iran's foreign minister saying he's in good health. There has been 2 attempts on his life, not just the first when he was, from what I can understand, very close to his father on Saturday, 28th of February, but a second attempt while he was in hospital. And again, the fact that there was a second attempt on his life in the hospital raises the question of spies within the Islamic Republic, because how could they have known exactly which ward, which hospital, and so on? And there is a lot of speculation about which commander of the Revolutionary Guard is a Mossad agent, which commander of the Revolutionary Guard is Trump's choice. I won't go in there because almost every name you can imagine appears in this list. We do know that the original, for whatever he says, Trump's initial thoughts were that killing the supreme leader and the commanders and bombing a few essential places in the first 2-3 days would lead to regime change. It's quite clear in some of the statements he's made off the cuff that he doesn't understand why this hasn't happened. And here, at least Iranians or Israelis are saying it was Kushner, Netanyahu and Kushner, primarily Netanyahu, convinced him that we know we've got enough information, everyone is against this regime, it will topple as soon as the supreme leader is killed. And this is the image, the idea that was being spread by supporters of Israel inside Iran. And of course, once that didn't happen, as Jack said, now they tell, even the BBC has to admit that there aren't many supporters of this war inside the country, and it's inevitable once you get bombed. Israel apparently, or according to at least one headline in Haaretz, has been considering and has been discussing with US the possible use of nuclear weapons. My hope is that someone has stopped them. My hope is that this will not happen. But Haaretz quotes David Sachs, who is a senior advisor to Trump, discussing this with the Israelis. Haaretz also has other articles discussing the issue of how Netanyahu and his government can come to terms with the possibility that there will be no regime change in Iran. Now, for Trump, it's easy to declare victory at any stage because he's changed his goals so many times. He can now say, we've done enough and that's it. That's victory as far as I'm concerned. For Netanyahu, it'd be more difficult if the regime survives because his whole campaign for the last couple of decades has been built on this. And Haaretz sees this as a major problem for Israel, for Netanyahu. I'm not sure. Looking at the Strait of Hormuz and the countries of the Persian Gulf, first of all, in the last couple of days, Iran is claiming, and again, I have no idea if this is true or not, but Iran is claiming that the US and Israel are using copies of Iranian drones, and they've actually labeled them like if they were Iranian, and they're attacking targets in the Persian Gulf countries. I'm not quite sure, but the fact that there are a lot of false flag fightings and so on is not new. The Strait of Hormuz, it's not just the oil that is significant. These countries, all their import, all the food that goes to Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, everything else goes through this Strait of Hormuz. In the current situation, where really, contrary again to what Trump says, Iran has threatened, hasn't done anything. The mines are doubtful. I mean, and even if there were mines, I'm told that there are ways of detecting the mines and avoiding them or moving them once you have the kind of power that the US has in the region. It is the threat is sufficient for basically closing the strait, because of insurance, because of other issues regarding movement of containers and tankers. But these Gulf countries now have to rely on borders with Saudi Arabia for the import of anything, right? And that is not a long term, that will cause a lot of problems for these countries. But I think politically there is far more serious issues for all of them. United Arab Emirates, Dubai in particular, in United Arab Emirates, Qatar to a lesser extent, were not just a place where influencers went, tax dodgers went there, ex-footballers went there, royals escaping the media went there. It was, if you like, a safe haven for a lot of Brits, a lot of expat. There are a big expat French community, for example, in Qatar and elsewhere. All of that is now at risk, i.e., quite a lot of these people who have fled or are in the process of leaving because airports are closed and they're all complaining that they're being stuck in Dubai and so on. All of these people are in a situation where it's unlikely they will go back, or at least unless they have capital that is only there, I think some of these people will not go back. And long-term effects on these countries is far more serious in some ways. Now, again, the conspiracy theorists are saying, well, Iran deliberately targeted these countries because it wanted to become powerful compared to these countries. I don't think so, because if you look at Iran's sordid, corrupt economy, it had an interdependence with these countries. So United Arab Emirates politically is an enemy of Iran, but Dubai was the, if you like, the exchange market, the exchange office for Iran's dirty money. That's where the Revolutionary Guard millionaires sent their money to turn it into dollars. That was non-traceable. The regime's involvement with Qatar is also similar. So I doubt if that was the case. I think it's one of those situations where it's an inevitable consequence of war that you can't predict what would happen, and some aspects of what happens is what we are seeing now. My only other comment is about the Kurds. As I had thought, this whole fear that Trump will manage a land invasion using the Kurds, or that the Kurds will be the troops on the ground for the US-Israeli army, is really not feasible. There is some divisions amongst the 5 groups that declared their allegiance to this plan, but most importantly, the others have taken up much stronger attitude towards this. And I was reminded this week that during the Life, Woman, Freedom movement, at the time when Kurdistan was very much a center of quite a lot of struggle for against the regime, one of the slogans in Kurdistan, not from Iran, was Life, Woman, Freedom, not just for Kurdistan, but for all of Iran, which shows that that section of the movement, which is the strongest of, if you like, movement from below we've seen in Kurdistan, as opposed to people sitting in Washington claiming how many thousands of supporters they have. That movement was very much saw itself as a movement against the Islamic Republic, but as a movement of the whole of the country, not just the separatist Kurdish group. So I think, again, There's a lot of publicity about that, but we should try and look beyond the headlines on this. And I finish here. I might have missed stuff, but I can come back during the question.
Thank you very much, Yasmina. I just wanted to make one point really before I take people from the floor. So like it looks very clear that Israel's intention in Lebanon is to annex it. So I don't know whether this is just from the recent expulsions of the population, but there's something like 500,000 people who've been expelled, and people now looking at maps of the evacuations, they've all, well, I mean, I'm sure there are plenty of people left in Beirut, but people are being continually pushed out of Beirut, and they're using white phosphorus, which is well known to be highly dangerous, not just initially, but to people and their children, and their perhaps even their future generations. It's well known as being highly toxic and highly dangerous, and it's using them in the residential areas. So I know from our contacts here in the Palestine movement in Ireland that people who are Palestinians living in Beirut, and particularly in the areas that were dominated by the Palestinian population, that they are in real, well, that they're terrified and that they're being moved and that there isn't really anywhere for them to go, because I believe that the refugee camps are already full. And who knows, I mean, maybe like what happened previously, but with Syria, was that from Syria people were going to Lebanon and then to Cyprus, then there was the pushbacks from Cyprus, and now coming up this year in June, we're going to have the introduction of the European Pact on Migration, which, I mean, maybe I should do an article on it sometime, but it really is full of pushback type operations, including outsourcing of applications for asylum to countries in the in countries close to Europe, which are known for their authoritarian nature and their anti-asylum views. I mean, countries that would make Rwanda look democratic. So, I mean, I don't know, it just sort of adds to the sense of, extraordinary crisis with this huge displacement. But I don't know, I mean, maybe Musha, maybe others can fill in a little bit more on what Israel is actually planning, whether it's thinking of moving settlers into that area as it has done with the West Bank, or whether there's something new that they're thinking of. But certainly they're making the best opportunity that they can of this current war. Now, okay, so I think actually we had somebody from the attendees indicating there.
First Tobias and then Sachin.
Yeah, there was somebody else though.